Hello, we're looking at Kevin Can F Himself, Season 2, Episode 6. We start with more of the usual Kevin nonsense, but this is actually really important because it's reminding us that Kevin's schemes pretty much always collapse in disaster, and that's going to foreshadow what's happening for the entire rest of this episode. But it happens to be about the Worcester Chronicle, which is, in real life the Worcester Telegram, but then that goes into this Worcester Chronicle scene with the Worcester Chronicle building and a van and so on as this little tiny building. In actuality, the Worcester Telegram is a huge building, and I happen to love this shot because it has both the Telegram and Gazette building, and it has that building in the middle there is just a part of Worcester City Hall, which, as I mentioned in the last episode, I adore. And then over on the left-hand side is Union Station, which is really, really pretty that they renovated and looks quite nice inside. So you get a view of a number of different buildings here in the Worcester area. Diane and Neil are still having their relationship, and he wants to have it get more where they can do things together, and she's being sort of cool to him and saying, I just want to keep it in this room, which doesn't make him happy, clearly. So their relationship is having issues. And then we have Sam and Allison, who are also having a discussion where he's saying, I thought you really need to leave. And she says, well, yeah, but I am stalling and I don't really want to. And then they get hit by a car. Now, part of why this is interesting is, this is the traditional, they seem to do these in TV shows all the time now because it catches your attention so quickly. So they're getting T-boned. So a car is coming straight across her in an intersection, and it turns out it's because Kevin, like a fool, pulled a stop sign out of this intersection to make his own commute go faster. So this car has gone through a stop sign and plowed into them in the side of the car where Allison is sitting. But when you look at the very next spot, clearly this car did not T-bone her. It was coming in the opposite direction and just sort of skimmed off the edge. Maybe they didn't have the budget to actually smash the cars or whatever reason. But this was one of those things that pulls you out of the moment where you say, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense from this other thing that we just saw 2 seconds ago. So then Allison gets over to Patty's house on foot. She doesn't want to be involved in the accident aftermath. And she says the accident happened at Primrose and Vine. Well, there's only one Primrose in Worcester, which is only a couple blocks from their house, they said. But that's in a cemetery. It's in Hope Cemetery. So clearly they're making up that street, which is a shame. They could have chosen some real street for them to have the accident on. But I just want to comment here, as we have a chance to pause, that so far, I'm still not liking the Kevin character. I am not liking the Diane character because of how she is treating Neil, even though Neil is being really compassionate and helpful to her. And I am sort of liking the Patty character more because Patty is trying to be a good friend to Allison and also trying to be a good girlfriend, even though she still has her doubts and isn't quite sure how this is going to work out. And she seems to be trying to be nice and care for her brother, Neil. But we'll see shortly that this is not going to continue to go well. We have Kevin, who is upset that his house isn't being cleaned anymore by his wife. So he's going to yell at Sam about how much she works, but he's ended up going to, in essence, tell Sam's wife that they're having an affair. And then in the meantime, Allison is off drinking at a bar and taking advantage of Kevin's notoriety, which is now gone because now the horse is the wildest thing in Worcester, but she's getting free beers out of the bartender in exchange for his name. And then she tries to warn off Diane on Neil for some reason, and Diane says, you know what, I'm actually pretty happy with him. So now we hit a very intriguing situation in terms of the whole dynamics of the arc of this entire series, which is about people being in abusive relationships and how they cope. And, we've had Allison being abused by Kevin, and we've had Diane trying to escape her abusive husband, and all of these other kinds of relationships. But here we have something that a lot of people don't think about a lot. The fact that men can be the abused one in relationships. And in this particular case, it's about Neil being abused by Kevin. So it's not, a sexual relationship, but it is still just as important. A relationship, friendships can be incredibly powerful, and they can be much more important than a sexual relationship. So we've got Neil in a situation where he really cares for Diane, and we've seen this over and over again, how much he is willing to do for Diane. But Kevin is such a force in his life that when he starts to get away from Kevin's orbit, Kevin gets really upset. And here we say that, Kevin called and was harassing him and making him feel guilty for doing anything other than exactly what Kevin wanted at all times. And Neil is feeling torn now that here he has something that he really wants. He wants to be with Diane. Diane makes him happy. Kevin just harasses him and berates him and that sort of stuff all the time. But Kevin has convinced Neil that Neil is an idiot, and Neil is being sucked into the orbit of all of that. And this is exactly what we've seen with Allison and Diane and all these other relationships in this situation. So now we've got Neil trapped in this kind of situation where he wants to get away from Kevin. He wants to be happy, but Kevin just keeps sucking him in because he feels guilt and responsibility and loyalty to Kevin. And even when Diane tries to point out that this is an unhealthy relationship, Neil automatically starts to defend him and say that, no, this is the thing that I want to be in because Kevin tells me this. Because for his entire adult life, pretty much, he has been at the beck and call of Kevin. Kevin has told him what to do, has berated him, told him that no one else is going to care for him the way that Kevin cares for him. So I find that this is really powerful to show that it's not just women who get abused by men, but men can also be abused, and we should take this just as seriously. Now, unfortunately, this means that we have a character arc for Neil where Neil then sabotages his relationship with Diane because he feels like he has to stay with Kevin. And we've seen this with all of the different characters, that they've done sabotaging kinds of activities. I mean, Diane went back to her husband, and Allison is still staying with Kevin, and so on. But I appreciate that we're seeing this from Neil's point of view. So then we have Diane, who is in a AA meeting, and she runs a liquor store. So this is a fairly common problem that happens where people who run liquor stores and have easy access to alcohol end up drinking a lot. And she had been finding that when she was happy with Neil, that she was drinking less, which is also, a common thing. If you can find something else to replace the alcohol, then you rely on it less as a crutch. And I know that there is heavy drinking everywhere in the world, but it also seems to me that Worcester, for some reason, tends to have a lot of heavy drinking involved here. Maybe it's because we have a lot of bars. Maybe it's because we had a heavy Irish and Italian presence, and both of them are fairly heavy drinking cultures as compared to some other cultures. But for whatever reasons, there are a lot of people in Worcester who drink very heavily, and a lot of this show seemed to have been leaning on that there's all sorts of scenes with people drinking multiple beers all at the same time, drinking very heavily, getting drunk, getting blackout drunk, getting drunk enough that they can't do all sorts of things. So the alcohol use and the cheating and other kind of behavior is all heavily intertwined in this TV series. And I think that's important to point out that is part of what happens. The heavy drinking then means people can't get to work, and if they can't get to work, they can't afford their bills, and then they make other bad decisions, and all of this kind of stuff together. So I am appreciative that they talk about that, and I'm also very appreciative that they intertwine the AA meetings in all of this for people who are dealing with addiction issues or alcohol issues. So I just want to say, I know I've had some issues with this TV series as a whole, with the way that it approaches the issues of battered partners, but I do think that they are doing a good job of showing how a slippery slope it can be for heavy drinking, and how the environment that you are in can draw you into it when you are not really trying to do it yourself, but you just fall into the habit, and also that there are support groups out there that can help you. So I want to give them a lot of kudos for heavily involving the AA and the community aspect of that for people who are in that kind of situation. And again, there's a lot of people in Worcester who are unfortunately in this kind of situation, that there are solutions and help, and that it's not easy. I also appreciate that they say in here that it's not an easy road, but that sometimes it's, the only way that you're going to save yourself, which I think is good to know. And then we're back to Neil and Kevin heavily drinking. And I will comment that I like the market basket shirt that he's got because a lot of people around this area do shop market basket. But it just reinforces how their life is so heavily involving of alcohol. And the shirt, if you can't read it clearly, says market basket moa fa ya dala. So it is doing it in a heavily Boston accent, which isn't really the way we talk here in Worcester, but I appreciate the humor. And while we're at it, Neil is wearing and has been wearing a shirt for Boston that shows a Boston leprechaun peeing into a pot, which represents New York. So that is also a common feeling around here that we are fighting up against the New York bigger sports teams. So here we've got Neil, who is bailed out of his jail situation, and it is Diane who has done it. His sister has deliberately not bailed him out, and Kevin hasn't bailed him out, so it's the one person that he was picking on who came for him and is going to help him. And the Worcester police station here is tiny, teeny tiny. When this is what actually the Worcester police station looks like, it is a huge architectural monstrosity in the brutalist style, and I've talked about this a number of times in my other videos, so I won't go into it in too much depth. But the point being that this is fairly well known in the US for its architecture and for how massive and fortress-like it is. So if they were to do anything, you would think they would do something at least like this instead of that tiny little strip mall looking thing for our police station. So now we are in the scene which sort of wraps up the Allison storyline up until this point, but which also summarizes so many other characters' storylines as well, so I think it's worth discussing. We've got Allison who says, you know what, I'd rather just stay than deal with the trouble of leaving. And we know that this is foolish because she thinks delusionally that Kevin can somehow get them out of any situation when it's been proven time and time that Kevin will just get them into further messes. But she sees that as an easier choice than leaving. We had Diane, who really did try to leave her husband, but then got sucked right back in again, to the point that even when she had a better option with Neil, she still thought it would be easier to stay with her husband, who she hated and who made life very troublesome for her, than to risk trying something new with Neil. We had Sam, who said explicitly that he didn't really like being with Jen, but it was so much easier being with Jen and just writing it out than risking everything that involved going off with someone new. And we have Patty, who knows that she likes her partner, and she just struggles to pack and think about changing her current life in order to go off with that. And then we could also say that we have Neil, who has gotten so settled in his routine with Kevin that even though he knows it's not healthy and has caused it all these other sorts of problems, that he just gets sucked right back into it again. So at this point, this scene isn't just about Allison and all the things that she's gone through. It's about all of the other characters, too, being stuck in their lives and knowing that there could be something better out for them, but there is just so much effort involved, and they cling to the things that seem good about their current life, and they're scared of the things that could change in their future life, and what if things are really worse, and maybe I should just stay where I am because it's the easier thing to do. So again, I have a lot of care and concern for people who are in abusive situations, and I know how powerful this can be for people. That change can seem really scary, especially if you have a situation you've gotten yourself used to after years and years. And why not just stay in that situation because you know what to expect and you know how to deal with it, and that is so much easier, it can seem, than going off into something else. So I do appreciate this show going into that topic from a number of different angles, a number of different characters, and I think that's an important discussion to have. So as much as I have had some issues with how particular characters have dealt with it, not in the sense that, I think that Allison should be a perfect character. I wholly think she should be an imperfect character, but I think they should have done, I don't know, in a more aware way of portraying what her character felt and was thinking about and all those other kinds of things. So I suppose I could say that the implementation of it was flawed, but I appreciate the issues underneath that were attempting to be addressed, and I know that it's a challenging topic to address, so maybe I'm holding them too high of a standard to have hoped that they would have addressed it better, and that the actors would have portrayed the issues better. Maybe this is just what they could do with what they had available to them. So with that being said, we are now ready to head into the final episodes of this entire show and see how they resolve these storylines.